North Cascades National Park. North Cascades National Park, located near the city of Mount Vernon, Washington, is based around and named after the North Cascades mountain range that runs through the park. The area was designated as a national park on October 2nd of 1968, the 33rd national park in the United States. The park covers 2,043 square kilometers and is home to abundant plant and animal life. Beginning 35 million years ago, oceanic crust began to subduct under the continental crust, forming part of the Cascade Range, and creating most of the volcanoes in said range. Most of the current Cascade Range was created around 8 million years ago by the same process, although very few of the mountains formed by the uplift 8 million years ago are volcanic. The mountains of the Cascade Range are split by terrains, with each terrain possessing a unique kind of rock structure and millions of years of history. The Cascades Range inside the national park is predominantly made up of metamorphic rocks due to volcanic activity in nearby areas, although many of the rocks are also sedimentary due to the Cascades Range rising partially from the ocean. Volcanic activity is still present in the park, although at very slow rates. The volcanic peaks and valleys, although separated by thousands of feet, have some very similar geologies due to rock shifting from volcanic forces. The North Cascades mountain range is known for its dramatic scenery and steep mountains, carved thousands of years ago by glacial activity. The Cascades Range is heavily glaciated to this day, and North Cascades National Park encompasses 312 of the 1,100 glaciers in the continental United States, covering a total of 110 square kilometers in area. Although the North Cascades are the most heavily glaciated mountains in the lower 48 states, glaciers have been quickly retreating from the mountains over the past centuries. Several rivers crisscross the terrain of North Cascades National Park, formed by glacial melting and in turn changing the land of the Cascades. Rivers, such as the Fraser and Skagit, are essential parts of the ecosystem, providing water to both feed plant and animal life and to shape the landscape of the mountains. As the glaciers recede over decades of global warming, the rivers in the park become smaller, affecting nearly every aspect of the park. North Cascades National Park receives varied amounts of precipitation and different temperatures throughout different areas of the park due to the steep cascade peaks blocking passage of water vapor or cold air to some places. The eastern sides of the mountains typically receive high snowfall, as cold air, coming from the north, tends to stop at such locations, whereas Pacific winds coming from the west tend to cover the area in fog, but rarely result in the high precipitation seen on the east side. The park's slopes and plateaus are home to hundreds of plant and animal species, living in the 8 distinct life zones of the park. The North Cascades is home to 1,630 species of vascular plants, more than any other American national park. And if non-vascular species were counted, the total number of plant species in the park would likely exceed 3,000. Animals are also abundant in the park, dependent on the hundreds upon hundreds of plant species. The park's 8 life zones are classified primarily by their elevation, as well as the species of plants and animals that reside there. The Alpine Zone, located at the highest elevations in the park, is home to a few organisms besides mosses. The Subalpine Zone, although warmer than the Alpine Zone, is still inhabited by small animals and coniferous trees. The Silver Fir Zone shelters many animals, big and small, as well as large forests. The Hemlock Zone is home to large communities of old-growth trees, as well as hundreds of species of animals. Large mammals such as bears, wolves, mountain lions, and mountain goats live primarily in the Silver Fir Zone, feeding on smaller mammals and species of plants. The majority of the park's small mammals live in the Hemlock Zone, feeding on grasses and the many species of bugs of the park. As well as 75 species of mammals, the park is home to around 200 species of birds and several species of reptiles, fish, and amphibians. However, the park's insect population is the greatest of all the animals, with more than 500 insects living within park boundaries. A high percentage of North Cascades National Park is forested, with a significant portion of the forests comprised of old-growth trees. Old-growth trees typically grow in the valleys between mountain slopes, where they receive nutrients and water from glacier-fed rivers. Mountain slopes are usually populated by evergreens, such as pines and spruce, which require less nutrients to grow and almost always grow for shorter periods of time than old-growth trees. Fire is essential to the ecosystems of all national parks in the world, and scientists working in the North Cascades track fire patterns and effects to learn how fire affects the region. Fire burns away old trees and gives new trees more space to grow, an effect seen in the longer future. Park officials control fires in the park carefully, as excessive fire can cause irreparable damage to the ecosystem. Invasive species of plants are the largest threats to park wildlife, taking up space and resources that native plants need to survive. As these exotic species do not have any natural predators in the park, they spread at astronomical rates, severely limiting native plants and harming the ecosystem. While park officials have organized volunteers to hand-pull the plants out of the ground, invasive species still spread throughout the park. For thousands of years, Native Americans have inhabited the area now known as North Cascades National Park, separated into two regions by the mountain range. The two main regions separated by the Cascades are the Columbia River Basin on the east side and the Pacific Northwest region on the west side. These regions are connected by rivers and mountain passes through which Native Americans developed ways to trade resources with other tribes. Several tribes developed in the North Cascades area, collectively called the Coastal Samish Group, with several subgroups such as the Snoqualmie, Samish, Skagit, Swinomish, Klallam, and Snohomish peoples. These tribes flourished due to the abundance of natural resources such as salmon, deer, berries, roots, and other edibles. In addition to having spectacular varieties of foods, the Native Americans could also create goods, such as baskets and drying racks, to preserve meat. Archaeological findings suggest that Native Americans have lived in the area since 8.5 thousand years ago, although these estimates do not take into account the fact that Native Americans could have temporarily passed through the area earlier than 8.5 thousand years ago. However, by 8,000 years ago, the Native Americans had already established stable homes in the North Cascades. Throughout the late 18th and early to middle 19th centuries, European explorers traveled to the western side of the continent, intending not to build a home, but to explore Western America. The first white settlers came to the area likely in the 1840s, seeking the plentiful resources of the valley. Expeditioners from the Lewis and Clark expedition also saw the area and reported their findings to the U.S., spurring travel to the west. As more and more Europeans traveled and settled in the North Cascades area, more and more conflicts occurred between Native Americans and white settlers. Several peace treaties were drafted, and on January 22nd of 1855, the Treaty of Point Eliot was signed by U.S. and Native American representatives. The treaty gave Native Americans land for hunting and living on, as well as federal health care, education, and welfare. However, for decades after the signing of the treaty, the United States government neglected many rights given to the Native Americans by the treaty. In the late 1800s, Europeans began to harvest the resources offered by the North Cascades in the form of valuable ores such as silver, iron, and gold. Although the area also had a generous supply of timber, it was not commercially viable due to the price of transporting it through the mountain range. Mining began in the park at a small scale, as demand for ore was not reliable, and miners faced many of the same challenges in transporting ore to market as did loggers. The area of North Cascades National Park possessed one more important and quite valuable resource, the Skagit River, running through the heart of the North Cascades. 3 dams were constructed on the Skagit River: Gorge Dam, Diablo Dam, and Ross Dam. The dams would provide power to cities lying near the mountains, although the city of Seattle would consume most of the 3 dams' power. Environmentalists concerned with the industrialization and rapid use of natural resources in the area, lobbied to dedicate a region of the North Cascades as a national park that would be known as North Cascades National Park. Spurred by the creation of Yellowstone and Yosemite National Parks, many companies also lobbied to create North Cascades National Park. On October 2nd of 1968, North Cascades National Park was officially created. Thank you for watching this video, and as always, if you enjoyed, like the video, share the video with your friends, or even subscribe to Sigma Documentaries to help support the channel. Check out some of the other videos in the National Parks playlist, or visit the featured channels for more content.